This new Jeffrey Dahmer TV show.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about this before.
And I think we could talk about it a little bit more here, just because it's fresh in my mind. Dude, it's fucked up. It's fucked up. Honestly, it's the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. I think. I remember you. You know, I've seen Serbian film. You know, I've seen Human Centipede. They've absolutely got nothing on this Jeffrey Dahmer TV show. I'm genuinely disturbed by it. Genuinely, because I know it happened.
I know. I was saying to you earlier that I have to kind of. I don't really like. I sometimes when I like stuff, I binge them. You know, I go through.
Yeah.
But with this show, I'm watching one in one evening, and I'm like, maybe I won't watch this again for a few more days because it's making me feel a bit uncomfortable.
Honestly, now I've watched the whole thing. I'm never gonna watch it again. It has fucked me up. I'm like, no, I don't trust anyone now. I walk down the street. I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. Who are you? What's your name? You better not be a Dahmer. You better not be a Dahmer. He's fucked up, mate. He is fucked up. And I needed to voice just how fucked up I've become from this TV show. Because honestly, it always surprises me that something like scares me. If I see something that I find scary in a movie, it's very, very rare. And the whole show just unnerved me from start to finish.
What I think is so unnerving about it, and it's also the same about many of these crazy serial killers, is that how long they got away with it, how many early warning signs there were, and no one knew. Like I was also watching about John Wayne Gacy a while ago. It was also on Netflix. I think it was a 4-part docuseries, and he killed more than 30 guys. He buried most of them under his basement, and
he never admitted to it.
Yeah, he was one of those. He had a very straight personality where he was just like.
I think he was saying that he'd black out. Like he knew he'd done it. Like everyone knew he'd done it, but I think he was saying that he'd black out. So he never admitted guilt to it. But obviously you knew what you were doing. Surely, at least you'd think a sane person would anyway. But I seem to remember reading somewhere, or maybe it's in the Dahmer show, I can't remember, but I believe he never admitted to it. Even when they gave him the death penalty, he never admitted to it.
Also, what's his name? Ted Bundy was like that. And these guys, a lot of them, they try and change their stories after they're convicted.
Yeah.
Try numerous ways trying to get out of prison and get some attention. So, yeah. Jeffrey Dahmer, I think, became a Christian when he went to prison, right?
Yeah, they cover it in the show. They cover it in the show where he gets baptized. Funny, so in the show, they point it out. The day he gets baptized was the day John Wayne Gacy got put to death, and it was also a total eclipse that day as well. So sort of wacky. It's like God was angry.
Yeah.
To let such a man, because I think I believe he only gets baptized because it's I may as well, because if it's all real, I'm definitely going to hell. So I better get baptized real quick.
What do you think about the actor playing
Evan Peters? So I'm sort of 50-50 on him. Not in the show, just in general. He's in Kick-Ass as a side character, and I think he's he does a good job, but he's not super noticeable in that movie. They don't make a big deal out of his character. But then once he gets into American Horror Stories, and when he became Quicksilver, he really got to shine. His personality was really, sort of center stage. And you could tell this guy actually is a quality little actor. His role as Quicksilver, very lighthearted, very, charming character. and then most of his roles in American Horror Stories are pretty brutal. So he's quite versatile, and I think he's brilliant as Jeffrey Dahmer. If I'm honest, I mean, because I think what makes it so unsettling to me is how real and believable it is. Because number one, I know it all happened, but number two, I think Evan Peters really sells it that he's the one doing this shit. I remember thinking like maybe Evan Peters is a fucking serial killer in his spare time because he's just so fucking good at like I believe that that you think you're doing the right thing. Like for you, it's the right thing to do, and and that just makes it so much more grim. Um, I feel like the show makes him a little bit sympathetic. Like you see his sort of childhood trauma, but at the same time, I mean, I don't think they romanticize him.
Mm,
I think very often you find like media about real world serial killers that romanticize. I mean, I think the most popular example would be Jack the Ripper, where it's become this myth, the myth of Jack the Ripper. And let's not forget, he was a serial killer. He was someone who murdered innocent women, and he never got caught. And that mystery of who he was, it's just taken on a life of its own. And there's this sort of romantic idea about Jack the Ripper, where you want to tell stories about him, you want to see stories about him. You had the comic book that eventually became a Johnny Depp film, From Hell. That's all about who Jack the Ripper was. I think Jack the Ripper has fought Batman. I think he's fought pirates. Like literally, Jack the Ripper is sort of a character of himself at this point. And, again, maybe we shouldn't be making, entertainment out of this sort of stuff. Maybe. I mean, I haven't got any moral obligation, but it does feel kind of morally grey seeming. Do you know what I mean? Like,
mm,
is it okay to make these real world figures who are horrible people into sort of some kind of celebrity? Is that okay? I mean, look at Hitler. I mean, Hitler's pretty celebrity. You make movies about Hitler, you make jokes about Hitler, but he was an absolute maniac. Now, is that where you draw the line? I don't know. Like, I make jokes about Hitler. I think Jojo Rabbit was a really good film, and it's predominantly Hitler is a buddy comedy. It's a buddy comedy Hitler movie, and I really like that film. So but it does seem morally grey. It does seem morally grey, and I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if it's okay or not.
well, uh,
Have you seen the South Park doing? They do John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer is like a Three Stooges thing. Have you seen that?
yeah, this was for Satan's Sweet 16th party.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I need the Ferrari cake. Yeah, yeah. And they're like, Dahmer, did you just kill that guy? Sorry, stuff like that, And I'm like, yeah, I find that funny, but after watching the Jeffrey Dahmer show, and I put that clip on because I find it funny. I'm like, oh, I'll put the South Park one on just to sort of lighten the mood. And I put the South, and I actually got a little bit offended. If I'm honest, I was like, oh, that's actually a bit much because now I feel like I know the people that he killed, and I'm like, nah, you got to be more respectful. Too soon, it was too soon for me because I really liked. There was a couple of characters that they introduced that were the victims of Dahmer that you actually really quite like. And yeah, I felt like because they're not characters, they were real people, and so yeah, I felt a little bit offended on their behalf when I watched the South Park clip. But I shouldn't. I feel I shouldn't. I don't want to sit there and get offended on behalf of other people. But at the same time, yeah, it just feels morally grey. It feels morally grey.
Yeah.
It's funny but bittersweet, perhaps.
I always think that they get away with making these kind of morally gray things because you learn uh, not to be like them. The kind of idea that
Yeah,
they are the monster. Like, for example, when you talk about Hitler, it's like, this is the example of the worst guy. Do not be like
Yeah.
him. This is like, and I think with serial killers, especially you mentioned also Dahmer's childhood. Uh, a big thing about like a lot of serial killers is they believe it's because of the way that they're brought up. There was actually one psychologist, I'm not sure, who I was reading an article about in the Guardian a while back, like how are psychopaths born or are they made? And his belief
Mm.
is that we all, when we're children, have the ability to become a psychopath, but it's through good parenting that we're told this is bad, this is wrong, this and that, and that
Well,
prevents us. And then
but
Jeffrey Dahmer had a really fucked up childhood. Like he was so neglected, so just abandoned.
yeah, but
Uh,
though, like, because in the show, because they're asking it once he's in prison, they're like, so why are you doing this shit? Like, they're asking, and he's being like, his attitude was, I just think I was born this way, like that's what he says,
True.
and you know, because you sort of see that even as a child, he was really quite weird. He was really kind of fucked up. Um, and I think they blame, so the father blames the mother for taking too much medication during the pregnancy. They even use thymidahide as an example. You know about thymidahide,
Yeah.
the painkiller in the UK that they gave to pregnant women, and then the babies became deformed. They use that as an example, and then the mother blames the father for being a neglectful father, but she literally runs out on him. So I feel like they were both quite neglectful. Um, but yeah, there was this sort of like uh, drug, drugs during pregnancy argument from the father. But the father was just trying to blame everything. He started blaming himself by the end of it. I thought,
Mm.
I forget the actor's name. He's in Step Brothers. He's the father in that. Um, but he's playing Dahmer's father, and he's given a great performance. I felt like when they tell him what his son's been doing, and he's like, "Can I have a minute?" And then they leave the room, and he just like has a cry to himself, and it's like, it's a great performance. Yeah, I'm glad I got some Jeffrey Dahmer off my chest now, because fuck me, it's been a rough ride. It's been a
I
rough weekend watching that.
I will tell you though, because we were talking about aging again earlier, and now looking
Yeah.
at this, there was some point like the whole like. Do you find it a bit because Evan Peters, he has quite a young. He's 35 years old.
What?
He's 35.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
yeah, he was born in 87. And it's kind of weird watching him. I'm not sure if you agree. Seeing him play
A
from
man.
17 to becoming an adult man, and it's like they just
Yes.
change his hair a little bit, or maybe they shave him, and like at the same time they're doing that, the guy who you just mentioned who played the father, his name is Richard Jenkins, by the way.
Richard
Uh,
Jenkins. Yes.
yeah, the father is Lionel. So you have these earlier scenes where Dahmer as a kid, about 10 maybe, with another actor, this guy called Josh Bratton. I've never heard of him before. I think he's probably not been too many things. But anyway, so you go from, there's this gap where you go from about like where he's about 10, you have the younger father, younger actor playing Lionel, the father, and then you
Mm.
jump. Dahmer is now 17. I think they're fishing actually, and his father's trying to talk to him about girls. And like the age difference is just is a bit insane for the. I didn't believe that
Yeah.
the. I don't know. It's just I don't know. I can't stop thinking about this stuff now about how they age up characters sometimes a bit too much, or just they
Yeah.
don't. And it's like, come on, man, it's not believable. This guy looks the same 10 years later, while
I
this guy
mean,
ages about 25 years in between two scenes.
well, that's right. Yeah, because I feel like when Evan Peters is a bit older, they give him like a little bit of facial hair, change his hair up a little bit, and that's literally it. And you're right. Because I thought he was like mid-20s, and like it doesn't make sense to think that because he's been around for at least 15 years in films. When was Kick Ass? Like 2010. So say 12
Some.
years.
Mm,
And it's like, all right, so if he's been doing it for this long, he must be in his mid 30s to late 30s. I thought he was younger than me, though. I thought he was
nah.
young. I really did think he was like in his maybe late 20s. I'm very surprised to hear he's 35. Fuck, he's nearly 40. He does not look like he's nearly 40. He looks like he's nearly 20.
He looks like he's 19, about to turn
Yeah,
20.
it's mad. I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised. Well, fair play to him. Fair play to him. You know, he's looking after himself.
Yeah. It's a jealousy thing. I feel
It is
jealous
a
when I see
jealousy
these.
thing. It's
Yeah.
definitely a jealousy thing. I'm literally looking at myself in the mirror right now going, you old fuck. You old fuck. You're 31 years old and you look like you're Evan Peters' father. I'm fuming. I'm fuming that he's older than me. Fair play. I suppose that's that Hollywood money keeping you young.
Shrapnel.